Good evening. I'm Spot On Weather meteorologist Matthew Euler, and welcome to the Teleconnections discussion for Friday, 11 December 2020. All right, starting off this evening, just like I do with every Friday night video every week, talk about the different MJO, Madden-Julian oscillation phases, and the areas of enhanced convection that's associated with those phases. Again, as a reminder, MJO is divided up into 8 phases, and the numbers here correlate with the areas of the most enhanced convection or areas of rising air motion thunderstorm development along the equatorial areas from the international date line at 180 degrees west longitude all the way across through into the Indian Ocean. And so various phases favor various differences in weather across the United States. And I'll show you those composites here in a moment. But just getting you familiar, if this is your first time watching our video here at the Spot On Weather YouTube channel about the MJO phases and where those areas of enhanced convection tend to form. Looking at the MJO temperature composites on the left for December, January, and February. The blue shading indicates below normal temperatures. The orange shading indicates above normal temperatures. So if we break this down, phases 8, 1, and 2 during the months of December, January, and February, if we have an MJO in phases 8, 1, and 2, the eastern United States tends to be colder than normal. And that colder than normal regime is typically associated with what's known as an upper level trough or a major dip in that polar front jet stream, allowing colder air to come down from Canada into the eastern United States. Whereas phases 4, 5, and 6, as well as 7, and 3 starts to become mild, but I'm really focused on phases 4 through 7 for the MJO. If the MJO is amplified within these phases 4 through 7, it generally leads to warmer or above normal temperatures across the Midwest and eastern United States. And that's typically associated with more of an upper level ridge across the east. Now, getting into the forecast for the MJO this week, the graphic on the right shows the GFS Ensemble forecast, and the green line represents the average of all the Ensemble means or all the model runs. This is the average or mean, the green line, showing that the MJO is going to be in a weak phase 5. This forecast, by the way, goes out through the Christmas Day holiday, 25 December, showing a weak phase 5 with minimal impacts, really minimal impacts for the U.S. through Christmas Day. Looking at the GFS operational model on the left, that is the actual aqua or blue shaded line there. Generally showing that GFS is operational, showing the MJO in weak phase 5, similar to the Ensemble that we just looked at, phase 5, with minimal impacts through 25 December. Now, why do I say minimal impacts? Look at where that bluish, lighter blue colored line is located in both the GFS operational here on the left-hand portion of the slide, as well as the previous slide on the right-hand side with the GFS Ensemble. If you note, phase 5 on the left would indicate more of warmer or above normal temperatures for the eastern United States. But again, as I've explained in previous videos, the smaller inner circle at the center of the diagram, that it correlates with more of a null phase, of very minimal impact. So the closer these lines are, the forecast lines are to the smaller inner circle, that generally indicates more minimal impact from the MJO. The farther away those lines get from the center circle there, the small inner circle, the more amplified the MJO is and the greater the impact. Turning now to the Navy ESPC MJO phase forecast. This forecast runs out through the 19th of January 2021. You'll see a solid green line. You'll notice again that the MJO is forecast to be in a weak phase 4 or 5 phase, eventually to phase 6, very weak, and then rotate right back into the center of the inner circle to become more null or minimal impact. So MJO right now, and this has occurred over the past 3 to 4 weeks, has been very inactive. Kelvin waves haven't really got things going as far as the MJO goes. And so the influence from the Pacific, as far as the MJO goes, has been very minimal on the United States weather. Moving ahead to the La Nina update, the graphic on the left shows the blue shading is indicative of below normal water temperatures. The orangish shading there indicates above normal water temperatures. And you'll see that blue shading there along the equatorial area, around the equator, just west of South America. That is associated with the current La Nina, and it's a moderate state La Nina right now. But I will tell you that when watching these trends, if you look at the graphic on the right, that shows the overall pattern going back to mid-September of where the water temperatures were, the anomalies, the departures from normal. And you notice how around late October, that blue line there on the right shows water temperatures were greater than 1.5 degrees Celsius below normal in that Nino 3.4 region. Then we had a little bit of a warming, almost up to minus 1 degree Celsius, 1 Celsius below normal. And then it kind of dipped down a little bit in mid to late November. And now it's starting to come back up again, that blue line. So right now the temperature departure in the Nino 3.4 region is sitting at 1.08 degrees Celsius below normal. And that is up just from last Friday's video. That is now up from about 1.26 degrees Celsius below normal. So what I'm getting at here, and this is a very critical thing to consider, is our water temperature departures in the Eastern Pacific, in that Nino 3.4 region, are actually rising or getting warmer. And this could eventually lead to a weaker La Nina as we get towards January and February, portion those months in the wintertime. So that could have an impact. The weaker the La Nina, the greater the probability of colder temperatures across the eastern U.S. and less of a La Nina influence as far as that goes. So something to keep an eye on. Moving ahead to the Arctic Oscillation forecast. This is just, again, the depiction of negative Arctic oscillation on the left versus positive Arctic oscillation on the right. Big difference in the overall upper atmospheric circulation pattern with a negative Arctic oscillation versus a positive. With a negative AO on the left, you get more of Arctic air coming down from Canada into the lower 48, into the eastern United States. On the right, you see that positive Arctic oscillation. You get more of a west to east, more zonal jet stream that blows from west coast to east coast and keeps the coldest air locked up to the north. The positive AO is also associated with a stronger polar vortex, whereas the negative AO is associated with a weaker polar vortex. So moving ahead to the forecasts as of today, the 11th of December 2020, and you look at this, the white circle lines indicate how AO is forecast. It's currently negative, and it's forecast to continue to drop even further negative, bottoming out around the 16th to 17th of December, below -3 on the scale there on the left. But there is no indication with this European deterministic forecast of the AL getting up to that zero line, staying in negative territory through the 21st of December. So that would indicate colder temperatures in the eastern United States. Looking at the European EPS, 50 perturbed members, AO forecast, again, this is pretty deeply negative, sharply negative, the AO on this model run. Pay attention to the green line and note that's the ensemble mean, or the average of all the runs. And it slowly is creeping up, getting closer to neutral by the 26th of December, but it remains negative all the way through late December. The European EPS Arctic Oscillation 50 perturbed members forecast, this extends all the way out into later January. And you'll notice a sharply negative AO once again is indicated by this particular model. The green line, the ensemble mean, eventually stays negative and then hits the neutral point around the 1st of January. And then after that, slightly positive. So that's the indications on this particular EPS AO 50 perturbed member model for the AO. The GFS deterministic AO forecast, I've been watching these the last week. Both GFS deterministic and European deterministic are keeping the Arctic oscillation negative throughout the whole period. And no change today. The GFS keeping it negative. The white circled line there shows how it bottoms out around the 16th of December. The AO down to the negative territory, just less than -3. and it just comes up a little bit, but then it drops again. So something to keep an eye on. And finally, the NCEP JEFS V12 AO 30 perturb member forecast. Pay attention to the green line. That is your average. That is your average of all the members of the model. And notice it stays negative below that zero line. So AO is forecast to remain negative. Now, let's take a look at the North Atlantic Oscillation, the NAO forecast. Again, as a reminder, positive NAO phase on the left, and then the negative NAO phase is on the right. We've had some recent cases with a negative NAO, and we've seen the blocking, that graphic on the right. We've seen blocking, not permanent blocking, not long-lasting blocking, but passing episodes of blocking up into the North Atlantic into Greenland with upper-level ridge. That's happened here over the last week to 10 days. Now, with a positive NAO phase on the left, you get more of a jet stream, that black line that goes west to east. It's milder across the eastern U.S. The negative NAO, with that blocking over up into Greenland and the North Atlantic, a much more amplified trough in the eastern U.S. and cold, and generally leads to more development of storm systems, more coastal storms. Let's take a look at the forecast for the NAO now. European deterministic, showing again the white circle line. That's the forecast from today, the 11th of December, keeping it negative. NAO staying negative through the 21st of December. The European EPS NAO 50 perturb members forecast out through the 26th of December, just beyond Christmas, keeps things negative. The European EPS NAO 50 perturb members, now this one extends out to late January, this particular Ensemble model run. The green line indicates the Ensemble average between all the members, staying negative all the way to around the 1st of January for the NAO, and then slightly positive, and then back towards the zero line there, 11 to 16 January, going more neutral. So generally negative through the 1st of January, and then transitioning to neutral in early January. The GFS deterministic NAO forecast showing that white line. Look at that white line, or the white circle area there. That's showing a forecast of negative all the way out through the 26th to the 27th of December, according to the GFS deterministic. And then the NCEP JEFS V12 30 perturb members, also indicating a slightly negative trend, the green line there, of the NAO for the JEFs. So right now, what we've discussed is a negative AO, fairly sharply negative, by the way, and we've talked about a slightly negative NAO, okay, possibly neutral transitions into January. So those are two indicators right there, two separate teleconnections that say cold in the east, upper level trough in the eastern U.S., and the dip in the jet stream across the east. Now let's take a look at the Pacific North American forecast. As a reminder with PNA, if you look on the left, that's a positive PNA situation on the left, the bottom left, and the bottom right graphic shows a negative PNA. So with a positive PNA, you get a big time ridge, upper level ridge that develops across the western U.S. into western Canada. Sometimes it gets so amplified that ridge bumps into Alaska. We got plenty of cold air in Alaska right now, just to let you know as a sidebar note. On the right, that negative PNA is more of a ridge and above normal temperatures across the eastern U.S. So recently, with the forecast here, look at the blue line. You notice how that blue line on this graphic on the European deterministic shows the PNA went sharply positive, went all the way up to values of positive 4 on the index before finally dropping back closer to neutral. And that's kind of like where we're at right now. We're sitting in a neutral stage right now with the PNA, according to the European deterministic. And that white circular line there, that stays around that zero middle line there, right? The zero value line around neutral conditions. We see a little bit possible drop-off there around the 17th of December to negative territory, and then maybe again around the winter solstice, 21 December. But in general, we're getting back towards neutral PNA conditions. For the European Ensemble Prediction System EPS 50 perturb members for the PNA, look at that green line. That's your average ensemble, your ensemble average or mean. Notice the green line, again, maintaining right around the zero line, so that's more of a neutral situation all the way out through the 26th of December. And with a neutral PNA, you typically have more near average temperatures for the basically all the way across the country, from west to east coast, really. You would have lack of amplification. There wouldn't be a lot of ups and downs, big ridges, deep troughs. with a neutral PNA. You'd have fast-moving systems from west to east. Looking at the European EPS PNA, 50 perturbed members, look at the green line, that's the Ensemble average once more, showing a neutral phase through about the 26th of December, going negative though, and more negative according to this latest forecast model by mid-January. So that's something to keep an eye on. Again, that neutral PNA would yield more of a zonal, fast-moving west to east jet stream, near average temperatures through about the 26th of December, transitioning to more of a negative PNA. That would indicate a trough in the western U.S. and a ridge in the east, and milder temperatures here for us in the eastern U.S. Looking at the GFS deterministic PNA forecast, again, the blue line indicates where we were, where we've been, showing how positive the PNA had bumped up to. And now that white line there is just kind of maintaining neutral conditions, ups and downs around the zero line between today, the 11th of December, all the way out through around Christmas Day, and then it drops off negative after the Christmas period into late December. So again, we'll have to watch the trends to the Pacific North American pattern. This is the NCEP Jeffs V12 PNA, 30 perturbed members, showing more of a neutral situation, and then actually going slightly positive. One of the models that's actually showing a slight positive trend around Christmas and just beyond. Here is the EPO Eastern Pacific Oscillation forecast. The graphic on the left shows a negative EPO. The graphic on the right shows a positive EPO. Now keep in mind, EPO, what happens in the Pacific has a huge bearing on the weather here. You wouldn't think so. You think, well, that's way far away from us here in the eastern U.S. That's not really going to have a major impact on us, but it actually does. And the EPO is one example of that. With a negative EPO, you're getting colder temperatures, you get Arctic highs and colder air to descend from Canada into the United States. With a positive EPO on the right, you get more of a west to east jet stream, milder Pacific air flooding the continent, and that's generally what you get. Here's the forecast for the European deterministic EPO. This is showing it showed a positive trend. Now we're dipping negative between now and about the 14th of December, back to around neutral conditions mid-month, and then back positive after 15 December. The European EPS, 50 perturbed members, the green line there again is what I'm looking at, the Ensemble average or mean, showing a neutral condition to the EPO, becoming more positive over time. That would be indicative of warmer temperatures across the eastern U.S. So you look at the image on the right, positive EPO, mild conditions, not just in the eastern U.S., but across the entire U.S. as a whole. Moving on to the European EPS EPO 50 perturbed members, more of a negative trend in the short term, becoming positive around the 16th of December, and then just slightly positive throughout the forecast period, all the way out through the end of January. GFS deterministic EPO forecast showing kind of like where we've been, positive, right around neutral, back down to negative right now, and then back to positive is the forecast by mid-December and lasting through the latter part of December. That again, EPO of a positive EPO indicates warmer temperatures across the United States as a whole. And then the NCEP Jeffs V12 EPO, 30 perturbed members. The Ensemble mean is a green line. We're going positive. You notice the trend of these models today. Now, these could change, but that's what we're looking at. As for the polar vortex update, the graphic on the left shows a polar vortex fairly stretched out and elongated. It's definitely undergone some weakening over the last week since my last video. Some of the forecast models have indicated the vortex actually splitting into two pieces, with one piece rotating down closer to Canada and possibly sending a cold lobe of air below normal temperatures down into the eastern U.S. Other models not so bullish on it. I've paid attention to this GFS model for the polar vortex. Look at the graphic on the right. That takes us out to the 27th, just about 2 weeks out, 27 December. We go from more of a stretching, elongated polar vortex to through about the 19th of December to a re-strengthening polar vortex the last week of December. So you notice the shape of those white lines. Compare that graphic on the left and see how they're stretched out and more elongated as compared to the circular or symmetrical shape on the right. So again, more compact lines, circular, more symmetric in appearance on the right on the 27th of December. That's telling the models are indicating that the polar vortex could possibly re-strengthen and reposition itself back over the polar area by late December. So why do we look at this? Because a weakening polar vortex can either A, be displaced, or B, split. So displacement or splitting of the polar vortex. And what happens, especially with a split, you can get some really cold, extremely cold Arctic air to spill down into the lower 48 from the Arctic. You get more of a cross-polar flow. You get a significant drop-off in your Arctic oscillation, the AO index, and you can get really interesting weather, winter weather, if you're a winter fan. If you're a warm, mild winter person out there, you want a mild winter, you want a stronger polar vortex. That's what we had last year, the winter of 2019-20. And the coldest air with a stronger vortex remains locked up over the Arctic area. So here are my final thoughts for tonight's Teleconnections discussion. The MJO is currently in the null phase through the middle of December. You could say, hey, it's on the border there to a weaker phase 4, to the null phase. But if it goes stronger into phases 4 or 5, then we're going to expect milder temperatures in the eastern U.S. For the MJO. If it gets more amplified or stronger, the MJO could definitely have a say in how things turn out for our winter weather for sure. But remember, phases 4 and 5, if I go back to the slide with those temperature composites, 4 and 5, there it is on the left, the temperature composites for the months of December, January, February. Those 4 and 5, look at the orange shading, Midwest to the East Coast. If that does amplify or become stronger in those milder phases, then we definitely could have a MJO factor into the upcoming forecast, the medium and long range. Right, so that's the status with the MJO. Right now, null phase, so not really influencing our temperatures, but again, if stronger, then we could be looking at milder temperatures. La Nina conditions do continue. That's a no doubter. Across the equatorial eastern Pacific, right now we're sitting at 1.08 degrees Celsius below normal on the water temps. They are in the Nino 3.4 region. And with that, we typically expect, with any La Nina, we typically expect more milder temperatures, drier conditions across the eastern U.S. and the mid-Atlantic. Now, again, as a note, water temperatures have warmed slightly since last Friday. Since Friday, the 4th of December, temperatures have warmed from 1.26 to 1.08 degrees Celsius below normal. This could be entering a weaker La Nina phase. Some of the models are now forecasting a weakening La Nina as we go into January and definitely by February. And what that does, with the stronger the La Nina, the greater the probability of a mild and dry winter across the mid-Atlantic. The weaker the La Nina, now that would have less of an influence, in my opinion, on our weather here. If we go to a weaker La Nina, we could see more intrusions of colder air and above normal precip. So that's just something to keep an eye on. And I've watched the trends in the models just the weather the last 10 days. We've had a couple, southern systems, which is more reminiscent of an active subtropical jet stream with El Nino conditions. So, I'm not convinced La Nina is going to be the major teleconnection of the winter that's going to really determine the outcome of what happens, especially if the temperatures continue warming. So it's something to keep an eye on. The models are indicating a negative trend in the Arctic oscillation AO through late December. We would expect colder temperatures or below normal temperatures in the eastern U.S. with an upper level trough or a digging jet stream in the east, especially east of the Mississippi River, with a negative AO. So, and all the models are pretty much, the last 7 days have been indicating this negative AO. Moving on to the NAO, models are indicating a negative trend in that NAO through late December. Now, this, if this actually verifies all the way through the later part of December, this would lead to colder temperatures below average temps in the eastern U.S., kind of in conjunction with the AO, with a more active East Coast storm track as well. Now, that's important. I'm already looking at the models today out for the next, basically between now, the 11th of December, and Christmas, 2 weeks out. And there's multiple storm systems that can impact the Mid-Atlantic, more of the southern systems, again, moving up the coast, more nor'easter type storms. So areas up towards northern Virginia, New Jersey, portions of Maryland, maybe even D.C., northward into Pennsylvania, into Connecticut, into Rhode Island, into Massachusetts. There's multiple storms showing up on the model runs, which could lead to, 2 or 3 winter storms, more wintry precip, Northern Virginia northward. So we'll have to keep an eye on things. Models are indicating a neutral PNA through about Christmas holiday, 25 December. Now that's going to favor a more zonal west to east jet stream and average temperatures across the whole United States, not just the east, everywhere. When you flatten the jet stream, you generally keep the coldest air to the north of that jet stream axis and the mildest temperatures to the south. So we would expect average temperatures with a neutral PNA through about 25 December, Christmas. But then the forecasts are indicating more of a transition to a slightly negative PNA through late December and early January. Now that could yield possibly milder or above average temperatures in the eastern U.S. at that point. Models are indicating a positive trend in the Eastern Pacific Oscillation EPO through mid-December. That would indicate milder temperatures in the eastern U.S., really coast to coast with a positive EPO. You get more milder Pacific air and more zonal jet. So there's 2 teleconnections that could potentially lead to more zonal west to east jet stream, less amplification to it. Models are indicating a weakening polar vortex through about the 19th of December, that stretching, that elongation, then a re-strengthening over the North Pole. Looking at the European model earlier this week, it looked like a huge lobe. The polar vortex was going to split briefly, not a major, not a significant split, but a certain lobe, a piece of that polar vortex moving south towards eastern Canada and possibly infiltrating into the lower 48. So we'll see how things play out with the models. We'll keep watching the polar vortex. In general, though, we look at possible cold temps moving into the eastern U.S. The latter part of December, then milder temperatures in the eastern U.S. after that into January, if that vortex were to re-strengthen and reposition itself back over the polar area. Overall assessment based on the teleconnections for this week, as of the 11th of December 2020, look at the overall temperatures with the various teleconnections. MJO, La Nina mild in the east, but then negative AO, negative NAO, colder and stormier in the east. Okay, so now we have an offsetting situation. 2 teleconnections saying milder, and then 2 teleconnections saying colder. And then we look at the PNA, and I really believe, looking at the models this past week, they've been in a state of chaos. They're trying to comprehend all of this stuff going on with the teleconnections, these competing teleconnections, these offsetting teleconnections. I really think the next 7 to 10 days, really, the main teleconnections to really be watching would be the MJO to see if it becomes more amplified or stronger. In addition, the AO-NAO as well as the PNA. I think there's a battle going on right now between the AO-NAO combo and the PNA. AO-NAO and PNA, I think, are competing and trying to offset each other with a transitioning negative PNA as well as those negative AO-NAOs. That's, they're competing against each other right now. Overall, the assessment, I think the upcoming forecast period is going to feature significant interaction between the teleconnections. Obviously, the AO continues to remain sharply negative. We saw that on tonight's slides. While the NAO is slightly negative throughout the period, while the PNA transitions neutral to possibly negative just after Christmas, and the MJO is in a weak phase 4, and the EPO is positive. So I think the biggest battle again over the next 10 days between now and Christmas will be the AO-NAO combo and the PNA. The models have been going back and forth with the idea of more of a zonal west to east jet stream, and then the next model run you look and there's a trough in the east. And then they go back to the zonal pattern again, and then the next run it's back to a trough in the east. I think we're going to see a combination of the teleconnections with the way they're working, and I believe we'll see more of a zonal west to east pattern. That's just my honest opinion right now, and more average temperatures. Now, when I say average temperatures over the period with above normal precip, average temperatures, what I'm talking about is there'll be periods of colder air below normal days mixed with above normal days, the milder periods. overall, you have a couple above normal temperature days and a couple below normal temperature days, and that equals out to be average. So when I say average, that's exactly what I mean. But we are seeing with that negative NAO, it's starting to reflect on the models with multiple storm threats along the East Coast between now and Christmas. So some of you in the eastern U.S. could luck out and have a white Christmas this year. I know we haven't had much of a winter recently in the East. So there is hope and optimism for you if you're watching from New England right now. Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. There is hope for you for this year for a white Christmas. And there may even be a few other surprises. It just depends on the phasing of the northern stream with the southern stream systems. If we get a really good solid phasing event off the coast, colder air could possibly penetrate further south into the mid-Atlantic. All right, that wraps things up. For Hampton Roads specifically, I'm thinking an average period, colder periods mixed with milder periods over between now and Christmas. That's the way it looks to me right now. We'll keep an eye on all these teleconnections as we progress to the winter. I definitely appreciate you subscribing and listening to my briefs, my presentations each Friday night. I hope everybody's having a great holiday season so far, and most of all, I wish everybody the best of health during this time period. That wraps things up at Spot On Weather. If we're not spot on, we're not doing the right. Check us out on Facebook. Check us out on Twitter. Subscribe to this channel, and we'll keep updating you on the weather. There may be special videos coming up depending on storm potential along the East Coast. That wraps things up. Have a great evening, everybody. Take care. God bless, and stay healthy.